My name is Guido Molinari. I'm the managing partner at Prysm Group, and it is my true pleasure today to have here at Unitize Silvia Attanasio. Silvia is the head of innovation at ABI, the Italian Banking Association. Welcome, Silvia. How are you today?
Thank you, Guido. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm great and excited to speak about the Spunta project.
Wonderful. So why don't we start maybe with you telling me what is the Italian Banking Association? Because I think it's important for the listener to understand the context for which the Spunta project came together.
Sure. The Italian Banking Association is the association that unify all the Italian banks. So we represent their interests and we advocate their instances to regulators and to other stakeholders regarding the banking sector.
Wonderful. And can you tell me, what is Spunta? What is this project that, I know now it's already in production, but, it started in 2017. And, can you give us a brief description of what you guys have been doing?
First of all, Spunta is a reconciliation process based on bilateral account, a sort of nostro and vostro account. It's a process generally run by back offices, which aim to clear every mismatch in a double entry bookkeeping. So it is about an exchange of information rather than an exchange of value. And the operations that and the information that that the banks exchange requires to be confirmed before being a redundant account. As you anticipate, we are working on this project since 2017. And the project has been promoted by the ABI, so by the association, and coordinated by ABI Lab, which is a center of research and innovation promoted by the ABI itself, a non-profit center for research and innovation.
Great. And, I know, Silvia, we have talked before that when you guys started the project in 2017, there were already a lot of enterprise, projects around blockchain. So you felt that, a lot of things had already been done. And you guys took quite a different approach to, putting Spunta together. Can you tell us a little bit about how your approach was different from other networks that were being built at the time?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the approach of other networks or other projects. I can say what was our aim and our tentative during all this project. We start working with 10 in the beginning and 14 and then 18 banks. And we always worked together because our first concern was to keep the governance distributed. So we wanted the banks to decide everything. So we worked together with the IT department of the banks, the innovation department of the banks, and the operation department of the banks. So we need to have the innovation and IT people able to understand the Spunta process, and the operational people able to understand blockchain and DLT, and especially Corda. So we started with some learning session, and I can testify that it was easier to let understand the blockchain to operational people that bring innovation people through the mindset of so traditional and fundamental process as the reconciliation is. Another thing it was, in order to reach this goal, we developed the user interface in parallel with the application. This was thanks to our business network developer, Entity Data Italy, and in this way, people from back offices was able to try and to see what we were developing and to address the further requirements, the further requests they could have regarding the software.
That's fascinating. So basically, you guys wanted, you didn't platform and try to go to the bank for them to adopt it. You want them to get their hands dirty and really be, an active member in the development of the platform, which is something that, I feel, having talked to some of the members banks of Spunta, was very much appreciated by them, and sort of unusual compared to other type of networks that have been involved. Now you mentioned, governance as, and the importance of a distributed governance process. Can you tell me a little bit about, you guys had, you said 10 banks to start, you grew the group to 18. And of course, there were banks of different sizes, right? Very large banks like São Paulo Intesa and smaller regional banks. How was the governance process structured? Did everybody have the same weight in the governance? Did you try to have a unanimous decisions? Like, what were the key aspects of the governance process that you undertook?
I think the main aspect was that we have in mind the same big picture and the same vision and result to achieve. So we were aligned from this point of view. As an phalanx of hopeless, we use this metaphor coming from the ancient Greece and the ancient Alexander the Great in Macedonia. So we tried to work together and to step together for all those 2 years. In this way, we tried to keep very focused on the key important decision, and in this area we tried to have the unanimity of decisions, but it wasn't always possible. So we voted a lot of times. We met. We were lucky enough there wasn't COVID-19 at that time. We met every month for 2 years. You can imagine 50 to 60 people in the same meeting room every 2 months deciding everything, buttons, colors, criteria for the automatic matching, kind of connectivity for the nodes, the platform and the providers, everything. We decided together, even from the very beginning when we started with the request for proposal in order to select the system integrator that would have developed the application. We made a selection board made of one component for each bank participating, and they had 1 vote each, exactly like Abilab has 1 vote. So we decided together even the fundamentals of the project. And we shared also between the banks the cost of the initiative. As Abilab was already a consortium, every bank paid the same. And we used this argument also during the time in order to justify why every vote every bank has 1 vote at the same way. But we never had a face by face, let me say, a big divisions about nothing.
Basically, what you're saying, because everybody shared the vision, even the people that might have disagreed sometimes, they didn't leave the table, right? I mean, they stayed at the table, even. Again, maybe some of their preferences were not reflecting the decision. So, I know, and you already mentioned, the selection process for the integrator ended up being entity data. And I know that, in terms of the platform, you chose to develop on Corda by R3. Can you tell us why Corda was chosen? I know you had considered other options, but why did you go with their platform?
Yes, first of all, we compared a centralized solution to decentralized solutions. And we decided to go through a decentralized solution because with another way, with a traditionally, let me say, centralized solution, we would have been necessary to define someone who would have managed all this information, who would have received all those informations regarding the balance of the different accounts, the movements of every bank, the information that are related to each movement in the nodes, etc. So it wasn't so easy to identify a single actor that could have run the centralized solution. And the second point was that with a centralized solution, probably it would have happened that every single bank would have kept its own system to reconcile information and just periodically send information to the centralized DB. And instead, we wanted to transform the process, to reshape the process in order to include some key component of the distributed paradigm. And this was made possible with the distributed solution. Then we decided between the permissionless and the permissioned, but as we have bank, we need to have to know to who we are sending information. And then we compared the solution that at that time, you can imagine, Corda was, I think, in the 0.9 version open source. Hyperledger Fabric was at 1.0 or something like this. So that was the era in DLT world. And we decided for Corda after sending an unforgettable list of 30 questions that we had made in order to better understand the possibility and the availability and the technical solution of every platform. And especially Corda was very adapted to was very easy in Corda to set up the bilateral channels. So it was quite perfect to replicate the bilateral accounts. And another point was that it was always possible to keep a constant dialogue with them. There were a company, and with that company, I mean R3, we worked together during those 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Very clear. And Silvia, just to point out, one of the aspects that you brought up, the centralized solution versus decentralized. I know that you guys really wanted to bring a standardized solution that every bank would have them. And you told me that the system that was in place for Spunta was based on a 1979 agreement, and every bank had sort of developed their own version of it, right? So as any centralized solution would have sort of not solved that issue that now you have managed to solve, which is in every bank the operator sees the same system and interacts in the same way, independent of where they are. So I thought that was a great, feature of choosing this decentralized solution like you guys did. I know that, one of the key successes of your platform, something that we have not seen in many other countries, are able, after, the time of experimentation with the 18 banks, to mandate the solution to the remaining of the banking sector, right? In Italy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's about 200 banks. So you had 18 in the sort of the trial, and then another 180 long tail banks that basically were mandated to implement. Can you tell me a little bit about how do you guys achieve this huge success of having the mandate, and how did these other 180 banks reacted to having a new technology like blockchain being mandated to them, even if that they're not, and on top of it they're not participating in the experiment?
Italy is quite complicated. So in our particular way of life, this is not really mandatory, but it's voluntary mandating. And what would I mean with this strange expression? We have an interbank agreement which is voluntary for the banks. They decide if adhere to the agreement or not. If they adhere to the agreement, they had to accept every part of this agreement. This means also the Spunta. So this process is not ruled by the central bank or any law of the state or something like this, but it's ruled by an agreement, an interbank agreement. So we were able to issue the new version of this interbank agreement that switches the banking sector from tapes to distributed ledger, without selecting a specific technology, of course, because we are talking about rules, so there has to be technology neutral, of course, but we supported and we provide the regulatory framework in some way to move to this result. And regarding the long tail of banks, of course, not everyone is happy when something like this arises in their plan, in their budgets, etc. But I think they understood that we was trying to support the transition of the entire sector into this new world, not only to prepare and to transform the Spunta, but especially to habilitate the Italian banks to run and to develop furthermore use cases based on DLT.
Mm-hmm. So you on the new rails, right? It's sort of a systemic change to DLT from what was there before. I know that we've talked before, and you mentioned to me that education was a very important part of sort of explaining to the initial 18 banks, but then all the other banks part of now of Spunta today, what Spunta is, and what are the advantages, and also you also mentioned to me that even auditors and sort of third parties, can you tell me a little bit about the educational initiative that you guys have done, and why do you think education is so important?
This technology is absolutely disruptive, and especially from a bank's point of view, it is changing the way we consider functions and controls and central subjects we are used to participate in order to manage our own process. So one of the main idea of this project was to experiment in the real life what this technology mean exactly, and in which way it can transform the way we used to see to look at the banking process. So sometimes it was not so easy to, for example, to measure the results of this project, because some characteristic was at a qualitative level, not at a quantitative level. And so we needed to change our mindset, to change the mindset of the people around the table, to change the mindset of the one who are required to decide about this project. So this was a very good exercise, I think, to be prepared for what's going next.
No, that's interesting, and I know we talked about it. You mentioned, of course, many things were qualitative, but there have been, very tangible quantitative results of Spunta to date. Can you tell us a bit about, transaction to date, how many banks have been in the network? I know you guys have gone through waves of deployment this year, how that is going, and, in general, what are the achievements of the project so far?
Yeah, the migration started in March 1st with the first 32 banks. And I'm particularly proud, especially as an Italian, that we set this date, I think in March 2019, and we were so punctual. We didn't have one single day of delay. The second wave goes to production in May 1st, so we arrived at 55 banks. And now, a few days ago, on July 1st, furthermore 20 banks are going in production, and more are coming and are arriving to the third and last wave, because by October 1st, the old process will be dismissed and the old rules will be cancelled. So this is the way in which we need to go into production. So every morning, the operators of back offices of the first 55 banks goes to the node, get access to the node, and start working their movements and their operations. This means stress from a performance point of view. We are uploading around 7 million movements per month, and this means a lot of transactions.
Mm-hmm. You told me that there were some people that might have been skeptical about what if we implement the new system and it doesn't work, so let's keep also running the old system. But can you tell me why that ultimately it's not going to be needed?
Yeah, the previous process was run on a monthly basis. And on the 20th of the following month, the banks received the data flow of the previous month. So around 50 days after the first movement of the data flow. So they suggested to keep the old system to transmit the information and the movements.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
As long as we arrive to the 20th of the following month, we have already uploaded and matched almost 2 months of data. So it was really a different metronome, a different time frame, that we are experimenting in the DLT world respect to the old one, which is not up to date already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So you went from 50 days to almost immediate. I think you ended up choosing T+3. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a fascinating change. I know we're, almost up with the time, but, I know, you have been, really a key piece of this whole project, acting really as quote unquote a project manager for Spunta and, bringing, as you mentioned, 40 people from different banks together month after month. I know there are, project managers out there trying to, push their networks ahead, notwithstanding all the difficulties of, having all of these different stakeholders with different opinions at the table. What are your recommendations for, people that, are in sort of the position you were in, in 2017, 18, and 19, bringing the project to fruition?
Yeah. The first suggestion is to buy a lot of coffee in advance because you will need it. But I didn't have such a key role. The key role was really from the group of the banks that worked with us. They were able to make my work in their banks because they were discussing, of course, with several internal different departments, and they keep the vision and the idea of the DLT and of the Spunta in their organization. My role was just to balancing some different requirements, some different ideas, some different needs, and to be pushed and pulled here and there, to try to balance everything. It was really important to maintain a spirit of team during all the time. So everyone was involved, everyone was part of the change.
Mm-hmm. People, again, you mentioned to me this before, people knew why the decisions were made. And so sort of there were no surprises in a way. Like it was like, everybody was involved. Now, you have banks already on the network. By October 1st, networks gonna be live for all Italian banks. You're gonna, all the previous agreement is gonna be archived. What is next, right? Now you have the rails in place. You have a functioning DLT system with the entire banking sector on it. I know there have been, many discussions. What do we do next? What wagons do we put on this rail system? So can you tell us a bit about, what is the future of Spunta, both in Italy and also I know that you guys have thought about, international Spunta, right?
Yeah.
Because Italian banks, of course, operate also with other European and international banks.
Yes, of course, the main idea is to enlarge the scope of the Spunta between other kind of accounts that exist in the banking sector in Italy, or involving also international banks. And from this perspective, we will keep our original spirit. So the idea is not to propose something ready to be implemented, but to build together with full transparency. It was another key part of our project. If something good happens or if something not good happens, we tell it to the bank. So we need to decide to design the new application together. And of course, there are other interesting projects that can reuse the investments that Italian banks have already made. I hope that the banks itself will bring the new use case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know, the system has been very focused at back office. Do you foresee that eventually this is going to have an impact on the front office, so like banks versus their customers?
Of course. I think that, for example, KYC process could benefit so much of this technology, and there are also a lot of initiatives that are reshaping our world out there. For example, I'm thinking about the central bank digital currency. And this is a matter that the central bank are managing. The central bank are deciding and designing exactly what they think it could be the best. But if they want and if they are interested, of course, the Italian banks wants to be part of this change and can support in testing and verifying and bringing our experience in this area.
Wonderful. Well, Silvia, it was truly a pleasure to have you with us here at Unitize. And congratulations on the amazing success you guys have had on Spunta. And good luck with the remaining rollout. I'm sure it's going to be good, but keeping fingers crossed.
Sure.
And we're hoping to have you again here next year and telling us about the next steps the Spunta is taking by then.
It will be my pleasure. Thank you, Guido. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silvia.